Bingo, it's ThinkTech, 9 a.m. in the morning on a given Thursday. We're doing Energy 808, the cutting edge. And today we're talking about the state of clean energy in the 2021 legislative session with Nicole Lowen, and she is the chair of the House Committee on Energy and Environment. So nice to see you, Nicole. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's get a handle of what's happening in the session. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of commentators out there with all kinds of characterizations to how things are doing, but it's always better to find out from the people involved, don't you think?
Of course.
So what's going on in energy in your committee?
Well, right now we're in the final couple weeks of session. So we're about to head into conference when we, find out the final word on what really passes and what doesn't. But I can talk about some of the bills I'm really hoping that we actually do pass this session, and then also some of the things that we introduced that we know are not going to pass, but that we want to keep talking about. So two of my big priorities are two bills that would that I call like state lead by example bills. One is for building energy efficiency that would mandate energy efficiency measures be implemented in all state facilities. And that bill also includes provisions that for new construction of state facilities, energy efficiency is built into new design. And then that also includes collection of data on state facilities energy use, so that would be available to the public and to people like me. Right now, we can't easily access like what is the utility bill on a typical state office building. And so provisions in this bill would make that data available. And then
well, on that one, is it a money bill? Is there money attached to it? Is the Hawaii
There's not
Energy
funding attached to it, and the idea is that a lot of this could be, if there's not funding directly available, that a lot of this could be financed through performance contracting, which is based on the savings that are realized through the measures pays for the cost of the work to implement over time. And then
so how would it work? All state agencies would have to look at this when they design or redesign their properties, and that means
the way that
go ahead.
We have just some deadlines in the bill. So currently, some agencies have undertaken some of this work, and so if they've done that, and I have to pull the bill to have the exact dates, but if they've done that already, there's like one deadline by which they have to look at it, and then an earlier deadline for state facilities that have essentially not taken any steps to date to invest in it. And the requirement is for cost-effective energy efficiency measures. So, the ones that we know will pay for themselves over a certain time frame.
So what's the role of Hawaii Energy in this initiative?
Hawaii Energy has, obviously they have a lot of expertise in energy efficiency and performance contracting. So I think although they don't have a direct role, they are, I think helping to have had some conversations just to help offer their expertise on performance contracting and making DAGs and our state agencies comfortable with the idea of performance contracting, which, a performance contract can be written a lot of different ways, and there can be some pitfalls. And I think that the state has, gained some knowledge around this and learned some lessons, and we want to make sure the performance contracts are to our benefit.
Sure.
And so Hawaii Energy has been helpful in advising in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, in the private sector, performance contracts are all over the lot. For example, if I want to do an energy contract in a given downtown office building, I'm going to be paid on the basis of how much energy I save, how efficient it is. Very easy for them, and so I suppose you can take a book, or Hawaii Energy can take a page out of their book, and apply the same kind of formula that way. But Hawaii Energy is this their bill? Did it come from them? It sounds like it would have come from them, no?
It came from me. It was
oh, good for you.
Yeah,
That's great,
something
Nicole.
that I've been thinking about. We've had bills in the past. I've worked a lot on energy efficiency since I've chaired the committee. Two of our top priorities have been energy efficiency and clean transportation, which I can talk about in a minute. And I think we've seen bills also trying to mandate more energy efficiency in private construction or commercial, benchmarking of commercial facilities, et cetera. And I think it's really important if the state is going to mandate this stuff of the private sector that we are leading by example and showing and doing it ourselves and showing that that it works.
Any opposition?
No, there's no opposition on the like fundamental intent of it. I think there is some agencies that are concerned about, their capacity to be able to do it. And, we've had to work with them over the past couple of years, I think, to get to a point where we've allayed their concerns and they're comfortable that they'll be supported by the state energy office and in doing the work, and that it won't be something they won't be able to implement or are at risk of being held liable for not following through on at some point in the future.
Okay, reasonable concerns. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
and
go to
it's
your next.
supported. I mean, there's a lot of support for it too. For example, the Chamber of Commerce has supported it because it is a job creator, and it's something that we really need right now with all the jobs that have been lost in the pandemic.
Indeed. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Right. So this year also, so the other I mentioned, it's a kind of a bit of a lot about the state leading by example. The other bill we have, House Bill 552, is about state fleet transition to clean transportation. And I don't know if everyone saw, there was a press release yesterday from DOT actually about their contract they recently entered into. And I think they're doing cross agency and having a fleet of Teslas delivered, which is kind of exciting. But this would mandate for all state agencies to transition to clean transportation for light duty vehicles. And the way that we're hoping to structure the bill, we still have to work with my counterpart in the Senate to get agreement. So we haven't finalized anything. But what we're talking about now might make the most sense is just to mandate that for all new vehicles that are procured or any replacement vehicles, that all new procurements are zero emission vehicles. And then that would kick in basically immediately for passenger cars, which are what on the market we have available cost-effective alternatives already for passenger car electric vehicles. And then for other light-duty vehicles, which would include more like multi-purpose vehicles and pickup trucks, the deadline on that would be as soon as practicable, but no later than 2030. Basically, for every time a new one is purchased, it has to be a zero emissions vehicle. And then there is an option for an exemption if for some reason it's not, for some reason that's not feasible, then the comptroller could do an exemption. But we think it's a huge opportunity for savings again for the state. And the DOT press release they put out yesterday indicated that this new contract they're entering into will save 75% of maintenance cost over the lifetime of owning the vehicles, and close to $300 a year, I think, in fuel costs for each vehicle. So it's significant savings for taxpayers.
People don't realize that electric vehicles don't require a whole lot of maintenance, and you save a lot of money that way.
Yeah.
By the way, just a couple of days ago, I saw a little piece about how this fellow, he's a bus contractor, and his name escapes me right now, who sells buses in Hawaii. He's all the counties, whatnot, school buses and all kinds of buses. And he is now bringing in electric buses in significant numbers. So he must have, he's waiting for your bill. He's out there. He wants your bill to pass for sure.
I mean, this would mandate, I guess a bus probably wouldn't be considered light duty. But that's definitely something we want to look at next year, especially for like school buses and things like that. And I know that the counties individually have been taking action on this as well.
Yeah. So is this your bill too?
This is also my bill. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's just exciting when you look at these new state these new vehicles coming into state DOT, and you think about, okay, we're adding all these new EVs to the market. In addition to that, there's state workers who maybe have never driven an electric vehicle who are going to have the opportunity to drive them. And that's a huge part, I think, of the transition to clean transportation, is just getting people used to a different kind of product and something they're unfamiliar with. It's the more difficult choice to make as a consumer, I think. So just the idea of having all these additional EVs out on the road and all these new people having an opportunity to drive them, that might change the personal choices that they make and then subsequently their friends and family. So like, we know this is the future, but it's exciting to see the momentum pick up on this transition, and the ball feel like it's sort of starting to roll downhill. So
Sure. Leadership by example, as you said. So is there any opposition?
no, I mean, the original version of the bill had had included goal setting for the state. This does as well, but the original version of the bill included goal setting also for private sector to achieve 100% clean transportation, and that raised some concerns among certain sectors. So we just narrowed it down to focus on the state for now, and we'll um, hope that our leading by example, inspires others to follow along. And
Yeah,
then,
if it works, then you can use it in other contexts, such as, buses and the like. The other thing I want to ask you is, of course, we want to incentivize electric vehicles, and this is one way to do it. I guess I would put this on the stick side rather than the carrot side. Is it a money bill? Is there any financial benefit involved? Is there any money being allocated for it?
not for this one, because it's just it's mandating the transition at the point that there would be procurement for a new vehicle anyway. So that's kind of built into state budgets already.
Mhm.
But we
Where
do
does
have
the EV tax credit fit these days? It went away statewide, I think. There's still a remnant on the federal side, I think. What can you tell us what the situation is?
did we ever have a tax credit at the state level? I'm not sure that we did for EV purchase, so that would have been quite a while ago.
That's right.
And yeah, the federal one I think is minimal at this point, but it's really we're really hoping there'll be incentives coming through from the Biden administration funding infrastructure plan, and we know that's been discussed, so it's kind of waiting to see what happens. We did have a bill last year for a tax credit. I think incentives are important, and the nice thing about direct incentives is you can more easily, like if we did a rebate, for example, we could really factor in the equity piece and focus that financial incentive on like middle and lower income families, especially, which is always, I think, one of those. The way that electric vehicles are often perceived still is that this is something that wealthy people can afford to do and everybody else cannot. And we'd like to change that and address it. If there's any truth in that or was truth in it, in the past, I think we can work on addressing that. But yeah, I'd like to see state incentives, but obviously the budget right now doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, the same kind of tension, the same kind of competing arguments exist with respect to solar tax credits. And I know there was a bill, I'm sure you saw it or were involved in it, to reduce the solar tax credits rather than increase them or leave them the same, but to reduce them. I think it came from the leadership. Can you talk about that?
I don't know where it came from. It didn't come from the House side. But I mean, I personally don't support that at this time. I think we're kind of switching gears from talking about transportation to energy generation. But I think that especially for Oahu, we've seen that we need more utility scale renewable energy projects, but that distributed generation is going to continue to be a huge part of the portfolio as well. And to reach our renewable energy goals in the RPS, then we're going to have to continue to build out rooftop solar and renewable energy. And I think that we need that there will be a time when the incentive's not needed and tax credits aren't meant to last forever, but now is not that time. And I really do believe the economic benefits it provides in tax revenue and job creation, it pays for itself.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, what else? I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no, well, so we had a record number of bills this year, I think, relating to electric vehicles, which is pretty exciting to see. The other one that we're hopeful we'll be able to pass something forward is just to find a continued source of funding for the EV charging station rebate program, which was established by a bill that was passed in 2019, and that has been very successful, has led to the either installation or in the pipeline of, in the process of being installed over 70, I think, new chargers in the state. And, I think this continues to be something where government can step in and provide that incentive, big barrier for people for purchasing electric vehicles if they live in, if they're renters or they live in condos, is where are they going to charge it? And so funding, having a permanent source of funding for this EV charging rebate program, I think is going to be very important to keep it going moving forward, and maybe be able to expand those rebates or start thinking about the visitor industry. How can we incentivize the transition of rental vehicle fleets? I think that would involve also having to have charging options at hotels and resorts and tourist destinations. So we have to start thinking about the big picture like that. So what we're looking at doing is diverting some of the barrel tax funds that are currently allocated to, I think HNEI currently gets 10 cents of barrel tax, and they don't really end up using it all up. So we're just taking a couple cents away from that. And the Energy Security Special Fund used to fund all the positions of the State Energy Office. In 2019, we transitioned them off of special funding onto general fund, so that money's kind of sitting there right now. So we're just proposing anyway, taking 1 cent away from that, and then having 3 cents of that barrel tax just go directly to fund the EV charging station rebate program.
It's indirect, but some of that barrel tax money comes to support the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. I hope you leave that in place.
Yeah, HNEI has quite a large balance sitting in their special fund. So and we talk to them all ahead of time. Like everyone talked to Rick and Scott Glenn, and where the source of these funds go, and everyone's in agreement. This is a proposal that could work for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you also, what about incentivizing private industry on these charging stations? I know, in fact, we've interviewed some entrepreneurs who are trying to do business in large buildings, condo buildings, I suppose hotels, multi-unit buildings. And they have a package that they deliver to the building, the association or the management of the building, where they will install a number of charging stations in the building for the benefit of everyone there. And that's a pretty good idea because it stands by itself. In other words, they don't need any money from you about it, I don't think. And it will proliferate the number of charging stations in the state. And I've always felt that this is an area where, I don't want to say public-private partnership, but both sides contribute to expanding the number of charging stations. Government, as you are describing, and also private entrepreneurs. How do you feel about that? What's the connection there? How should that work?
I mean, that's essentially what we're doing with the rebate. It doesn't cover the entire cost of the charger, but we're incentivizing, private people to put in privately their own EV charging stations. I mean, the program is focused on, as you mentioned, multi-unit dwellings, publicly accessible commercial areas and workplaces, because we think this is where charging infrastructure needs to be built out. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of hitting that tipping point, I think, with the EVs. I mean, we've had a lot of other proposals this year, including like to mandate EV-ready new construction for any new construction. For example, of a multi-unit dwelling, all the parking stalls would need to be ready to accommodate an EV charger installation. We always get a lot of pushback on that kind of thing because it does add to the cost of construction, and it's asking the building industry to do something differently, and they don't like that. But I think it is a benefit to consumers, and especially low-income families. Without charging in multi-unit dwellings and condos where people live, it's really a challenging decision for them to purchase an EV. I mean, you have to have the charging infrastructure, in places where it's convenient for them to charge. And I think that's what people need to understand also. When we talk about EV charging infrastructure, it's not like a one-for-one exchange of turn every gas pump into an EV charger. It's the way that it's utilized is a little bit different. And the fast chargers are important, but it's also, better for the longevity of the battery, to charge, to have a slower charge, and people need to be able to charge at home or at workplaces or where their cars parked for longer periods of time. But I think that there's I think that we are still at the point where we need some government push in that direction, and I'm working to provide that. But I firmly believe there will be a point where this just becomes the market, and a lot of this gets taken care of just by regular market forces once we have more widespread adoption of electric vehicles.
Yeah,
People
but
are going to want to purchase a condo in a place that has EV charging or go shopping somewhere that has EV charging. And there will be a point where, all those things start to fall into place.
yeah, very interesting. But again, it's an opportunity for lead by example. It's giving what do you might call it, a state nod, as Linda Lingle used to call it. In other words, a kind of a statement to the public and to the business community and to the real estate community that the state supports this endeavor. And furthermore, that the state will continue, to look at it and support it as necessary. And that message really is very important for everybody. Which takes me to another question about this. So right now, there are something around 13,000 electric vehicles operating in the state. And we have the incentives of the charging stations and all that. I just wonder, and as you said, incentives are never forever. Either tax incentives or this kind of rebate incentive, never forever. So the question is, when will it be enough? Will it be enough at 20,000 vehicles or 50,000 or 100,000? By the way, there are, something like 1 million vehicles, personal private vehicles in the state, which is, whoa, in my opinion, too many, sorry. But when does it get to be that you don't need to incentivize this at all?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, Jay, I could maybe answer that question for you. I mean, people make different predictions about this, but I mean, I couldn't say. But I think we'll really start to see, in my opinion, I think we're already starting to see that shift, and we'll continue to see it over the next 5 years, where a lot more people are opting for electric vehicles. The vehicles available become more affordable, and alternatives become available for larger size vehicles as well. Those are, close to being comparable on the market, but not quite there yet.
Now, one thing is for sure is that we and you have to keep watching it to tune it up and make sure that we have our, we're sending the right message.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really important, which is, we focus on this in my committee because the transportation sector is a huge contributor to emissions and climate change, and also, it causes local pollution, and then the more that we can rely on locally produced energy sources and be energy independent, the better as well. So we focus on that in my committee in this transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. But it's also really important to reduce vehicle miles traveled and to think about public transportation and multimodal transportation, pedestrian facilities and bike lanes, et cetera, and try to get people out of their cars a little bit more.
Yeah. In many ways, the buck stops with you, Nicole. That's a fact. Okay, so what else you got on your plate?
So like there's I'm trying to think what would be interesting to discuss here. We had a number of bills this year looking at whether we should do a carbon tax or carbon pricing. That's floated around for a number of years, and ultimately nothing moved forward to conference. We'd also in 2019 funded a study to try to boil down how would the carbon tax or carbon price be implemented in Hawaii, what would the impact be. We had at least some results from that to consider as we move through session. So that's one thing. I don't know if you're interested in.
Is there anything happening?
Well, no, we moved some bills out of committee, but everything died subsequently. And I think the feeling is just that with the economic issues we're facing right now with the state budget and just individual families and small businesses in the state, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding that. And even though you can make the argument that with the right structure, a carbon tax can make everyone better off, it's not clear that we've fully considered enough of the impacts or boiled it down to really understand not just how it would impact people sort of on average, but what would be the difference between a person in a rural area versus a person in urban Honolulu, and also hadn't looked very closely at the impacts to small businesses. And so, yeah, at this point, no, nothing is moving forward.
Yeah, an observation is that we're, coming off COVID here. Knock wood, we're really coming off COVID. The legislature is still in a state of trauma over what happened last year, and the fact that we, have residual, if not continuing, issues around COVID and the economy. and that enters into the discussion of any bill that calls for expenditures. And I wonder, what the mood, as far as you see, of the legislature is in terms of spending money on energy this year.
What would you view as the role? I mean, just to get more clarity on your question, how?
Well, I'll go to my follow-up, which relates directly to it, and that is, bills around the tax credits for solar and solar storage, which have been kicking around for the last must be 4 or 5 years already. What's are they there again? Do they have any prospect of passage? What is the mood about that?
I mean, we're just about to go into conference, so like I can never say anything. I can't say for sure. My take, and I mean, I'm the chair on the House side, is I don't support making any changes to the solar tax credit at this time. I think, as I said at the beginning, yeah. So we're still going into conference. We have to see what happens. Yeah.
What about the connection of I guess in developing properties, new properties, old properties, to get a credit for the storage, costs of storage? Because in the industry and at the front end of what's happening in solar is the technology and storage. And I know there have been efforts to try to get a downline credit on storage, but those have not yet succeeded. What's the status of that? Is there anything pending on it?
The tax credit right now applies to a system. So depending on the design, it kind of includes the storage. If you're doing like most of the new systems coming online have some kind of storage involved for people getting rooftop solar today. So doing a separate tax credit that just applied to the storage, I mean, I think that would involve an increase in what we have currently, right? So is there an appetite this year to do new tax credits? Like, absolutely not. I mean, we're facing huge budget shortfalls, and there's a lot of good things that we should be funding, and just the money isn't there for it this year. So we need to dig ourselves out of this hole first, I think.
Yeah, well, absolutely. On the other hand, I don't know if this crosses your desk or not, but an argument can be made for some credits and some incentives as credits and incentives that will help build industries and therefore build the economy. The classic example was Act 221 10 years ago, which was intended to build the economy. Unfortunately, people didn't see it that way, and it failed. It was sunset before the sunset. And I wonder if that, is that something? And I know the energy office is interested in building workforce, and I'm sure they get signals from the governor about that. Jobs. And I wonder where that is on your desk, building jobs, building sectors of the economy.
A lot. I mean, it's like jobs in renewable energy come from us having renewable energy projects that people can work at, and jobs in renewable and having, building out the rooftop solar industry there for new installation or replacements down the road and repairs, etc. So, I mean, I think like we do facilitate that with the tax credit, and of course with the RPS, because the RPS is mandating bringing more projects online, and transitioning off of fossil fuel. So I think one thing that we can do is maybe think more about what are the jobs that are going to be available at these renewable energy projects in the future, and then think about what is our workforce pipeline to make sure that when those jobs are available, that we have people locally who can apply for them, and qualify for them, and it doesn't become something where people are being brought in from outside the state to fill these positions because the people in the state don't have the right workforce training. But I do sometimes think there's a disconnect the way a lot of people talk about jobs in clean energy as if we just create them by throwing money at it. I mean, there has to be a place to work. So
Absolutely.
it's the whole pipeline. You do it by making sure these projects are coming online and moving forward.
Yeah, I would not disagree at all with that. We don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to ask you one more question. There's so many issues pending outside of the normal legislative flow. I was going to ask you about it. Maybe we have to, if you have time, we could pursue those later. But But one of them that sticks in my brain I want to ask you about is a statute that was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, requiring that coal not be renewed. That we know we don't have any more coal facilities after September of 2022. And there have been issues about that with the PUC, with the utility. And I wonder if you could comment on it. Where are we with respect to that? Are we going to be able to make that deadline? What can or should the legislature do to follow up on it?
Yeah. Yeah, we passed that last year. It was actually one of the few things we were able to pass during that kind of short and weird COVID session. And, you know, we passed that. A lot of the thought on a lot of members of the legislature. I mean, I was glad that we passed the bill. It was something that was supported by a lot of environmental groups, but I think a lot of people felt like, oh, this is just kind of a statement piece rather than being really substantive, because all the testimony from the utility, from the PUC, et cetera, was this contract is set to expire. It's not going to be renewed. End of story. And so, you know, passing this matched up accordingly. It wasn't really necessarily changing what we already understood to be the trajectory of phasing out the coal plant. So yeah, it's been interesting to see the more recent developments with the delays in some of the projects that are meant to come online. I still, in my view, don't think there would be any appetite for moving backwards and deciding to extend the contract on the coal plant, nor do I think that we should. And I hope this doesn't become an opportunity to like somehow vilify renewable energy. It's like coal remains the most expensive energy. And the only reason it's looking at potentially creating issues is because of delays that have happened in the development process. And I mean, I'm sure you've watched some of the status conference updates at the PUC. You know, it's figuring out where can we push stuff forward faster, where are the delays occurring. And I think they're really digging into that. That's important. We did have some bills at the beginning of session, you know, putting pressure on or looking at this issue of bringing projects online. None of those ultimately moved forward, but I think it maybe did help push for that status conference to be called and to bring some attention to this issue. Because clearly, I mean, we need to have these projects moving forward. What they're proposing to do right now is make up the difference by their like standalone battery energy storage project, but basically that would be charged partly at least with energy from oil, and that's not what we want. And not only that, that's more expensive to, you know, take the oil, create energy, put it in a battery, and then discharge it out of the battery at some point in the future. It's a huge loss of efficiency, and it's a lot more expensive for ratepayers than even if you were just using the oil generator directly. So we don't want that to happen, and I think everybody's on board with trying to avoid that. But I mean, it also makes me think, although when we passed the bill to you know, ban the extension of the coal plant, it seemed like, well, this is the trajectory that we're on anyway. And now that it looks like some of the assurances we were given may not have been 100% accurate, I feel like it was even more fortunate that we did pass that bill, because we need to, you know, we need to push and make sure this transition is happening.
Yeah, it raised the issue, it focused on the issue. It had a value no matter what. Yeah. So all of your discussion and your points and your policy, and it makes me ask you two final questions in our remaining time, Nicole. The first question is, where do you see the legislature, the PUC, the state energy office? We have the utility, we have the consumer advocate. Gee whiz, I'm sure I'm missing a couple of things. Where does the legislature, was your committee and the Senate Committee on Energy, where do they fit in developing policy and making sure we're on the right track and we're going to get there on time? How do you see it?
I mean, yeah, I think we are the policy setters, and you know, I think that I can speak for myself. I can't speak for the Senate, and it could change with every time committees chairs change. This can change, but I mean, I think that being a little aspirational is important, and that is in part the role of the legislature. You know, I can't tell you how many calls I've been on with someone from HECO where they say, well, it's just not as easy as setting a goal. And it's like, well, of course we understand that, you know, and there's a lot of nitty gritty details involved in operating a utility that I do not have the technical expertise to fully understand. But I also think it's pretty self-evident that without some of the goals that we've set at the legislature, under myself, but also future or past chairs, like our 100% RPS, we would not be where we are today, and we would not have moved as quickly. And the goals are absolutely essential to making sure that we move forward. And this is a direction that our constituencies want. They want energy independence and clean energy in Hawaii.
Yeah, you have to see it from the 50,000-foot level for sure. And my last question, also driven off your really great discussion of these policy points and bills and prospective bills and considerations, is how do you like being the chair of the House Energy Committee? What's it like, and how do you like it?
I mean, I'm passionate about this subject matter, so I really enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy the policy side of it, and I think there is a difference between being a chair and being a member, just because you are the decision maker. So so it's easier to access information or have a seat at the table in a lot of these discussions. So no, I enjoy being the chair of the committee. There's a lot of really important issues to work on. This is like so, in particularly at this point in time, with all the issues we're facing with climate change, et cetera, it just feels very important, and I enjoy working on it. Politics can be challenging, but it's part of what you have to figure out to be able to get stuff done. So.
Amen to that. Nicole Lowen, Chair of the House Energy and Environmental Committee. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming around. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Aloha.